People of Reddit, what was the worst date you ever had? Part 2. Lord, this is long. So I started talking to a dude who was 55. The quality of his photos looked recent. Chatting seems nice, so I agreed to meet up for dinner. He mentioned he likes Italian food, so I suggest a few places. Those sound a bit weird. I really like the Olive Garden. I balk a bit but eventually agreed to meet this man at the Olive Garden. That someone was shot point blank in the face at 6 days earlier. I don't want to sound bougie, but listen, I ain't ever had the desire to eat at Olive Garden. Quite the opposite, actually. Either way, we settle on this Olive Garden. Address share and everything. I show up and dude is it there. I wait and message. 15 to 20 minutes later he says I'm here. I ask where. He says by the wait stand. Ain't no dude there. I send the address again and he then tells me he's at a different Olive Garden. That is 35 minutes away. I'm like, y'all know what? I think it's time to call this a night. Let's try again some other time. And he goes into this long message about how he really wants to meet me. And he drove an hour yada yada yada, so for whatever reason, I say okay. I'll wait. Fast forward 30 minutes and in walks dude. Dude is clearly at least 65 or has just had a rough life. Not like his photos. Easily 10 years older. So the following is a list of things that followed because unfortunately I could not duck out without him seeing me. We had to sit at the bar because this mall-adjacent murder Olive Garden was packed. I drink on occasion, but am not into the culture due to the alcoholism in my family. He keeps getting annoyed with the waiter in a visible way for things that don't matter. He keeps calling the early 30s waiter beau. He looks at me and says I really need a boyfriend. Bad boy it. He proceeds to tell me that he just put his husband in a nursing home and that we can go back to his place an hour away. I basically said nothing the whole time. He talked non-stop. He put his hand directly on my balls in plain sight of everyone and also tried to lift my shirt up to rub my belly. When finished with dinner he then lifts his shirt up right there at the bar and injects insulin. Not with an insulin pen but with the old school vial and syringe. He then loosely capped the used syringe and sat it on the empty plate. He then told me that I was really cute and had loved to take me back to his truck to breed me in the parking lot. When we got up to leave he tried to put his arm around my waist like we were a thing. By this point we had been there about 15 minutes in all, because I wolfed down that watery ass Alfredo in attempt to end the shit and I was done, and simply said no when he put his hand on my waist. When we got outside, I immediately turned to go to my car and he said, "Can I have a good night kiss?" And again, since I was like fuck it, I feel kind of bad for this obviously clueless prick, I said you can have a goodbye hug, which did not stop him from trying to turn my head and put his tongue in my mouth. I just kept a straight face and pulled my head back as forcefully and steadily as I could, while giving him the death stare. I get home and there is a long message about how he had a great time, and he could tell we would be great together. It also included a totally unattractive photo of his dick. I blocked him, and here's the deal. If any one of those incidents happened without any of the others compounding them, I could have found him to be an okay guy. Hell, if he had been cute enough, not lying about his appearance and whatever else that was terrible, I would easily have fucked him in his truck, but unfortunately, he was none of those things. He was consistently the worst person I've ever met. No looks, no brains, no compassion, no awareness, no sensitivity. An ugly-ass dick and the worst disposition I've ever had the displeasure of dealing with. This was my first date after asking my husband of almost 10 years to separate. I briefly considered saying nah, let's stay together even if that relationship had deteriorated, because I was so shocked at the audacity of this damn man that I didn't try another date for months. Went on a date with a guy who spent the entire night cutting me off when I would speak, only to speak about himself and in third person. Took his retainer out and set it on the table, grossed me out, and when we were saying our goodbyes, he decided he was going to kiss me when I was least expecting it. He shoved his tongue down my throat, pulled back and said I guess we're boyfriend and girlfriend now, and then ran to his mom's car. We were in high school and I barely knew him. Literally just wanted to go on a date and get to know him lol. When I decided to officially end things since he was convinced we were dating, his mom proceeded to call my parents and accused me of breaking up with him because he was on the spectrum. Had no idea he was on the spectrum. Just imp like how creepy he came across and how he kissed me without consent lol. My dad said she doesn't have to explain herself. She doesn't like him. It's over. End of story. Guy lived down the street from where we were meeting and showed up over 2 hours late because he was waiting for his weed dealer. Finally meets up with me and says we have to wait for the dealer together since he still didn't come. Proceeds to have me hotspot him so he can talk to the guy who comes an hour later. Later that evening he wants to get food but says his phone died so he'll have to pay. And he'll transfer me back later since he doesn't carry a wallet. He decides he wants a beer and tells me to wait while he goes home to get his ID. Then I get a text from him asking me to check his backpack for his wallet. While I don't find his wallet, I do find a giant bottle of lube and about 30 condoms. He finally gets back with a charged phone and his wallet but still somehow convinces me to pay for his meal. After that we start walking and as we get near his house he sees his dad doing yard work and speed walks about 15 feet in front of me so he won't see us together. A while after that, we pass his sister who says hi and then asks him what time he'll be home. He says very soon and then, when she leaves he walks me to a random corner and says you can call an Uber home from here. Looking back I'm frustrated with myself for putting up with any of that. I went to a restaurant with a girl I literally met for the first time a few minutes prior. We sat down, ordered, and our server stayed around and talked our ear off until our food came. When our food came, our server sat down with us to keep talking. We were beside ourselves at this point. Then, 4 other servers surround our table and start chatting us up. This went on for like 20 minutes until one of the other servers standing around our table asked me how I knew our waiter, the guy that sat down with us. I said that I didn't. Once I said that, the servers surrounding our table looked visibly uncomfortable and left us alone. They clearly thought we were friends with their co-worker. We only had about 10 minutes of the hour and a half we were at the restaurant to actually talk. But at least it gave us something to laugh about afterward. After all that, she wanted to meet me at my house. Her car broke down in Trenton and her GPS stopped working. So I had to go find her and pick her up. Never saw her again after that. What a day. I went on a date with a guy who I knew before we went on a date. He was in the same friends group as my ex, and we hung out a few times. When my ex and I broke up, he admitted to having a crush on me and asked to go on a date. I said yes because even though I didn't find him attractive, I decided not to date on looks and give the guy a chance. It was awful. He talked over me the whole time, talked with his mouth full of food, and was overall super obnoxious. We played pool. He won, and yelled, "In your face," loudly over and over again while pointing his pool stick at me and jumping. I was so embarrassed. He got too drunk, so I had to give him a ride home in his car. He texted me the next day asking when we could go out again, but I didn't respond and never saw him again. One of my worst dates was also one of my best. I took a girl out, we got a couple drinks, had great conversation, went back to her place, smoked some joints and made out. Albeit she had a couple drinks in her, she seemed really into me, showing me her nudes on her phone on the drive back to her place, basically asking me if this was our first date. It wasn't a very official date, was just supposed to be getting to know each other. I told her it could be but that I'd take her out on a more proper date come the weekend. She then was asking if we were boyfriend and girlfriend. Now I was in my early 30s, she mid-20s, and I told her I was for sure interested in her but that we shouldn't rush into things. She even went so far to ask me how often we could have sex, despite not wanting to that night, which I respected. Maybe my response of a few times a week wasn't enough for her, because she ghosted me after that night. Buckle TF in. This was a rough one and really stands out. So we had set up the date and I told her I could meet closer to her. Since she mentioned she didn't drive, she insisted on going to the brewery I first suggested and mentioned that she could just take the train. I double-checked that this was okay and she said she really wanted to try it. Well, on the day of the date, I get a call from her when I'm waiting at the brewery telling me that she got lost. She's at a close-by bus station, so I go to pick her up. Apparently the train didn't take her all the way to the brewery and she had to take 3 buses. The date gets started and it's actually going pretty well. We have a lot in common and we're hitting it off. Then the craziness starts to show. She tells me that she has an altar at her apartment and loves to practice witchcraft, and talks about how her aunt could speak to spirits and she inherited the gift. I'm just nodding along at this point. Then she tells me that she thinks it's super unfair that men can so easily get vasectomies, and that she tried to get sterilized at a hospital and they refused to do it. I'm just like WTF at this point. I'm drinking water to sober up and get out of there and end the date. We finally finish up and it's pretty late. I offer her a ride against my better judgment, because I didn't want her to have to take public transit or rideshare so late, and she says okay. When we get to her place, I realize she lives in a really not so nice area. There's no parking either, so she tells me to park on red. I'm just ready to leave at this point but really needed some water. She gets me a water bottle and looks sad and expectant when I take it, like she was disappointed that I wasn't gonna kiss her. I kiss her and then peel out of there. Well, the craziness continues the next day, and she blows up my phone asking me what I think about the star signs and astrology. I'm like, I don't really know much about it, and this pisses her off. She keeps pressing me and telling me that if I don't learn about astrology, that she would put a curse on me. I ended up blocking her and never looking back. I'm probably cursed. I went on a date with someone from Facebook dating. I was pretty fresh out of a relationship and had recently discovered FB dating. I was caught off guard by how many conversations I was having with different women. I had used POF and off and on for years prior, and had only talked to a very small handful of women from those sites in that time, and had only ever met two, including my recent ex, so I was texting this girl back and forth. Wasn't really the most enthralling conversation in the world, but we agreed to meet up for dinner regardless. She lived about an hour away from me, so I was driving out to meet her. On the way, she texted me asking to cancel the date. I pulled off the highway to text her back, letting her know I was already on my way, but had only just gotten on the highway, so we could postpone. She changed her mind and said I could come meet her. I asked if she was sure, and she said yes, so I continued in her direction. When I got to the address she gave me, I let her know I had arrived, and shortly after, she emerged from between two houses, looking nothing like her photos, and dressed all the way down. I didn't think much of it when I saw it, but once she got in my car, I was overwhelmed with the stench of what I could only describe as raw garbage. I didn't comment on it, and carried on with our date quietly, wondering to myself if I had just picked up a homeless girl. We went to Kelsey's, had dinner and some entirely unremarkable conversation, and called it a day. I paid for per meals, and she had me drop her off at a different location than I picked her up from. Never spoke to her again. Younger sister set me up on a blind date with an older coworker, said she thought we'd get along great. When I arrived at her apartment, it was a mess, with clothes and dirty plates strewn about, and she herself was already half Suze and unsteady. Orange lipstick half smeared, green eyeshadow, cockeyed eyelashes, clunky wooden jewelry, laddered hose, scuffed and shapeless flats, one safety pin bra strap showing. You get the picture. Strike one. On the ride to dinner, she repeated a non-stop stream of inanities from supermarket gossip mags. Sister hadn't told her I'd worked in the film and TV production industry for 30 years, had worked with, or at least had met, many of the people she was running her mouth about. Strike two. I took her to a new, high-end Mexican restaurant, a reservation for which I had had to call in a big favor from our production coordinator. While we waited at the bar, she ordered and downed 3 shots of Patron in 15 minutes flat. When we were shown to our table, she flirted shamelessly with the waiter, then ordered 2 of the most expensive appetizer lobster tacos, the most expensive entree, filet mignon con hud la coche, and a pitcher of margaritas. For her, I was driving and couldn't drink. Strike 3. Just as her shockingly expensive entree arrived, she loudly announced she had to go to the little girl's room and abandoned it to get cold. Strike 4. When she staggered up, she pushed her chair into a waiter behind her, which caused him to spill the carafe of red wine he was pouring onto the next table, and its 2 occupants. Strike 5. She didn't even notice. Strike 6. After she was out of sight, I apologized to our neighbors and put a 50 on their table to pay for their cleaning. Then I found our waiter, paid for our meal, paid for the neighbor's wine, gave him a generous tip, and booked. 3 days later, the woman actually cornered my sister in the ladies' room and asked why I hadn't called her yet, because apparently we'd had a wonderful time. She'd actually become so blotto after those margaritas that in the morning, she didn't remember I'd abandoned her after the first hour, or that she'd had to take a cab home. Strike 7. Was supremely pissed at sister who figure I'd get along great with a ditzy, unkempt, barely functioning alcoholic slob